Callie, right? I've told you before, if you've got a BA honours, right, and you're dismantling the government and saying there's no law or authority in anything the government does, right, then when they designed your qualification and course, right, then clearly it's not valid because nothing this government does is valid or sovereign, and therefore it's a load of tosh. So when you went to university and someone said, oh, well done, Callie, you studied really great, here's a qualification, it's not valid, is it? Your certificate is invalid. You don't have a qualification because this government's got no authority or right to give you it because they're non-existent, right? So therefore, why are you saying you've got this qualification, right? This LLB honours, because you're not qualified for anything. Because the people who designed and created the qualification are invalid. They have no authority or power to do anything. Because literally you're saying that this government is a load of rubbish and we're going to dismantle it and it's got no meaning to it. So why has your LLB honours got any meaning to it? And also, I'll say this as well, right? For the local councils, right? This is important for the local councils, right? Before the corporations, right, there was only local petty sessions, and local petty sessions were held in pubs and clubs or houses, sometimes in a magistrate's house, right, or in a pub, right, convening. If it was a serious matter, quarter sessions and assizes, you should know that the King's Justices went round on a circuit, right? But they held it wherever was convenient before they started building, proper buildings to have it in the town hall or in an actual court building, right? They were just on tour, right? You know that. All of the local decisions in local matters for civil and the Court of Civil Requests or civil, right, were held in assizes or quarter sessions, not in the petty sessions, right? Including whether or not they could have any money granted to the local area, right? Granting of money for repairing roads and things like that. That's stuff that the council deals with now. Also, permission to build cottages, right? That's planning consent. That was assizes. You could have a jury in it if you wanted, a civil jury, right? So the local people would decide if you could build houses or not. So if it's Greenbelt or if loads of people don't want a massive development to ruin the countryside or whatever, right? Or massive, aeroplane jet engine factory, the people would have random people from the area and say, right, we don't want it, right? And when the local councils became incorporated and had a mayor and aldermen and a full common council, they were the ones who voted on things, right? And particularly when they ditched the juries. Now, the London model for it, right, the Court of the Aldermen, is the better model to explain it. Because you've got the full council with all the councillors who receive petitions from the local people about the local area, right? And then they can present the petitions and get the full council to vote on them. Or you ditch the councillors and you have the Court of Aldermen, which is an actual court, can hear civil or criminal cases. I know that the Lord Mayor of London can hear cases in the Old Bailey because he's a judge, right? But the Court of the Aldermen, right, is like in the William Penn and William Mead trial, right? You can hear criminal and civil cases. They had a jury. In the William Penn trial, it was the Court of Aldermen, right, with a jury, right? Now, if William Penn and William Mead had gone into the court before they got prosecuted and got permission to have a street protest or gathering or whatever you want, it was actually a religious issue, right? But whatever. You would go to that court to get permission from 3 of the judges. So that would be the mayor or a couple of aldermen, right? But there's a jury there. Or they could have a grand jury. Now, the grand jury, the best part of the grand jury, could have given them the consent, right? So this is when they got rid of all the juries, right? Now, what's the problem? The problem is this, right? Now, in metropolitan councils and in all councils that have elected councillors in a chamber who vote on things, right? This is the problem. It's still a court, right? It is a court, right, with a different format to usual. Now, you can see the format when you've got the Lord Mayor of London with the aldermen, which is like the cabinet, right, the bench, and then you have the full council, the Court of Common Council with all the councillors, right? Take them or leave them, right? Where's the jury gone? Well, they got rid of it, right? Now, listen, this is the important thing, right? It is a court and they're making orders, right? They're making orders and putting orders through, like approving traffic regulations, allocating money, issuing parking tickets and fines, right? Giving consent for building, right? Where's the jury? There isn't one, right? Now, this is where is a mind bender to a perversion of the course of justice and an abuse of process, right? When an applicant comes to the council, right, and says, I want to build 50 McDonald's restaurants in this area, right, he does it because he's got the money. If he hasn't got any money, he can't do it because how can you afford to, right? You can only do it if you've been making loads of money out of everyone and fleecing people, right? So you can't walk into the council and you can't walk into the council with a case and make a case to the council to build houses and put your plans there with £10 billion backing or whatever if you ain't got £10 billion, right? But this is the thing. When the electric companies come into the court and they say, we want to put loads of 5G towers in, right? Or we want to build loads of street lights, or we want to put a new bus lane, and the bus company comes and says, we want to build a new bus lane, right? This is the thing. The applicant, right, is, unfortunately, he's got contracts with the council. They've got contracts, and they've got long-term contracts, right? And they've also got agreements, and they've been given awards by the council, right? Now, if an applicant has got a relationship or a working relationship with a court, which is meant to be impartial, right? And has even got contracts with that court, and has even been given awards by that court, might even have a sponsorship deal with that court. How can the court be impartial and make a judgment in an impartial judicial decision to approve an application by a plaintiff or applicant when the respondents are the local people, right, and they don't want it, but the court has got a contract with the bus company, right? Now, how can you make an impartial decision if the court has a special relationship or contracts or deals? It's like if you go into a court, right, and Mr. Smith owes Mr. Simpkins, right, £10, and you are trying to prove that, he owes you £10 and you're defending it, right? If Mr. Simpkins is friends with the judge or the court, and he's got contracts with the court, and he's even received awards from the court, and he's got a working relationship with the court, how can the court make an impartial decision, right, whether or not when you present the case? Because surely there is something going on there, right? There's something definitely going on there, right? It's not a court with an impartial decision. And this is how the judicial system from the assize circuits and the quarter session circuits has transformed into corruption, and it's mainly by the political parties and the bus companies being in the Labour Party and the electric company being in the Labour Party, and the whole model of it. The councillors, not always educated, and do they want to do what the local people do? Mainly because of profit and money and corporate power and industry, which is what happened with the Luddites trying to smash all the machines up, right? And they were pissed off about the minimum wage. They still never got the minimum wage lifted, by the way, no matter what petitions they did. And from then on, crime skyrocketed, and they invented the police to keep everyone under control. And it's just continued, and now we've got, mega corporations like, Jeff Bezos, Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. Also this, right, it says that in the old Institute laws, it says that everything is to be done for the profit of all the realm. The profit of all the realm, not just for the profit of Jeff Bezos. He's not even from this country, right? Not for the profit of Donald Trump, not for the profit of Branson, not for the profit of, Rishi Sunak, right? For the profit of everyone on all the realm, but everyone's not profiting out of it. In fact, they crank the prices up and they're putting us as cost of living through the bottom of the floor, right? I've just read if you read the Sir Edward Coke books, which you need to read to understand the law of Parliament, right, when you're using Parliament, right? If you read the Sir Edward Coke books and all the offences, what the origin of the offences are, there's one on monopolies, right? And it says that monopolies are illegal, unlawful. Well, actually, even in body politic as well. But that's what the Conservative Party is, a monopoly, right? The Labour Party and Tories only having two parties who dominate the whole of the political arena, that's a monopoly. It's a monopoly between two huge, immense parties, right? And everyone else hasn't got a chance, right? That's a monopoly. Jeff Bezos has got a monopoly now on everything, right? And even taking away people's skills and knowledge, replacing it with like automation, right? Google's a monopoly. Google have a monopoly on the whole internet, right? They're the dominating search engine and all the others got crushed, right? And now they've got so much money that they're using it for Alphabet and all this, like, genome technology and protein technology research, and they're taking over YouTube. Don't you think it's peculiar, right, that Mark Zuckerberg has got Facebook. The BBC told everyone to go on Facebook, and they all went on Facebook, right, to introduce it to England. Now, where are the successful English platforms? Where are the really, really, really successful British social media platforms? There aren't any. There's TikTok, it's from China, right, or whatever. Now, how about the American platforms? Well, they had Twitter, but then it got taken over by Elon Musk, who wasn't even doing platforms, but he's got cars, right? Now, this is the thing. Oh, look, Mark Zuckerberg. He's got a platform, Facebook, but he's also got Threads and Instagram. There's 3 platforms there. They're all different, but they're all owned by the same person. So he's got a monopoly. Mark Zuckerberg's got a monopoly on social media. What social media company isn't owned by Mark Zuckerberg? Or X, right? This is the thing. Like, so, okay, but, what about Google? Definitely search engine monopoly. But they are big monopolies there. There's never been as many different music artists in the history of England, right? So why isn't it the case that there's never been as many social media platforms? Well, there were loads of independent forums, right? All of the music artists were under these massive, Branson, right? Record companies. The record companies had monopolies on all the artists because all the artists had to be under these big companies. Like, few of them went solo. Now, because there's loads of music artists and you can do it, yourself on these, free platforms, notice that no one's making any money out of it. They won't give you any decent money for it at all, right? So it's like the monopoly really on music is kind of crumbled, right? But instead, notice that all of the sales of the music has been taken up by Amazon and etc. And they're the ones who make all the money out of it and the profits and have the monopoly on all of the artists. So the artists are all under these bigger monopolies rather than all being completely independent and just getting all the money directly. So it's always a case of there's always a fisherman with a big net scooping up everyone else, right? And managing to control them under him like the factory owners with the Luddites, right? But people had their own skills and had their own business and petitioned Parliament over the taxes and over their individual things. But these monopolies actually aren't meant to be lawful. This is what Keir Starmer wants to do, to put more Labour people in the House of Lords, to affect these House of Lords voting monopolies, right? But they're illegal anyway because the idea of a political party, from when Edward Coke wrote the book, the whole concept of it is illegal, right? And I actually believe that Parliament should be full of independents. The political parties should be illegal, and every MP should be purely independent and represent their constituents. And, and if they say, we can't do that because they won't get along in Parliament, well, they're always telling us that we can't get along with each other, right? They're always telling us that, we need to behave ourselves and set an example of behaviour. If these MPs are so well behaved, why don't they show us that they can all be independent and not related to a party, and that they can then call each other right and honourable and, etc., and, all our fancy language, and then they can all agree with each other and come to terms with each other on their differences. And it actually should be very difficult to get laws made, right? It should have to be an exceptionally good idea. It should have to be an absolute brilliant idea that all the MPs like in order for it to get voted through. Otherwise, it should be extremely difficult to get laws voted, made or changed. And not this freight train policies of manifestos that these parties just think they automatically can put through because they got elected. You're going to debate your legislation, right? And this is the problem with strategies, right? When you've got all independents and they really, really do have to debate it, and they really, really do have to tell the truth, and they do really have to talk about it, not evade questions, you get very, very high scrutiny to everything, and doing something's difficult, right? But then you can't have all these people who are outside of Parliament, like Tony Blair now, and all these big corporate companies like Jeff Bezos and that, with all these long-term strategies. We're planning your future. We're planning for it to be like AI, and we're planning for it to be all the Oracle thing, whatever that Larry Ellison's doing, and China culture. We're secretly planning all this, and this is where we're heading the country in. You can't plan ahead, and you can't set a long-term strategy, because those long-term strategies, if you want a long-term strategy, you've got to commit to it. And that means that, if you commit to a long-term strategy, that means that no one else really has got a true say. Because if anyone else had a true say that could stop that strategy from happening, you can't have it. So to have a long-term strategy, thinking ahead, you've got to lie to people and jip them off, right? Or else they're going to stop you from doing it. It's going to be impossible. And really, that's what local councils have been doing with these bus companies and electric companies and all this 5G and that. They've all wanted long-term strategies. They've all thought that they could automatically have whatever they wanted because they've got all this money, and the council's going to put it through. But the local people would have stopped them from doing that, right? The local people would have prevented them from doing it, because local communities tend to self-regulate, right? If local people are happy with the village and they like the village, right, then they tend not to allow more houses to be built. Even if they're having a lot of children, if loads of people are having children, right, they'd be reluctant to build houses, and therefore they would contain it, and it would force people either to move away to other places or not have as many children, because the people wouldn't be, even though they couldn't control themselves, like having more kids, they really wouldn't want more things to be changed and adapted. They want to keep the village as it is. And then you've got the TV coming in through the magic looking glass telling them, oh, buy this, buy that, go to B&Q. Aren't you content? Why don't you have a conservatory? Why don't you go to B&Q and redo the garden? Why don't you, they've always been lured to buy more things when there's nothing wrong with it, right? So you've got the influence of the TV, because there's always somebody who wants to make money out of other people, right? So without those influences, right, people would be self-contained. Now, what the Tories will say about that and reform is like, oh, we don't want to stay in the Dark Ages, because if that was the case, right, then, we'd all still be living in a medieval village. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, right? No one's stopping people from learning in universities, developing technology. No one's stopping professors from coming up with inventions and inventing things like radio, TV, and mobile phones, right? But it's when you get people who are only doing it to make money. Their objective isn't really to help out, people in a backward medieval village just for the sake of the fact that, everyone's got a beautiful cottage with a beautiful garden, and, wouldn't you be better off if you had a new sofa and a new mobile phone, and rather than just the radio, you had a TV and that, right? And, oh, by the way, now you need a conservatory where we make house bigger, etc., etc. And by the way, we'll build a jet engine factory next to you, right? It's to do with like creature comforts, right? Animals don't like it when everything gets changed around in their environment. They like to know where everything is. What's happening is, like, there's nothing wrong with evolution and progress, right? But we're being forced and provoked and pushed into changing too quickly just for the benefit of other people's wealth and richness, and they're spoiling and ruining certain areas that were perfectly fine and okay, and rushing and building areas which, might be urban sprawl and rubbish and have loads of crime just because they're building a load of rubbish, right, and not building decent things. So that's the problem. But, there is some truth in your law, right? But they're changing the laws too quickly. Now they want to get rid of juries completely and totally, and they want everything to be judged by, Brian Leveson or whatever, or some AI robot and not humans, which is, ridiculous. And then they're deciding, what you can and can't say and all this. So, the local councils, it's got to be a perversion of the course of justice, because what people don't, that it is a court. It is a court, and parties are coming to make a case, and it's meant to be impartial, right? But it isn't. It can't be impartial when there are contracts, right? But anyway, people need to read those books that I put, those Parliament books, because, like, we need to use, like, the jurisdiction of Parliament, right, for all the political campaigns, and they're just pretending that, it doesn't exist effectively, right? So it does exist, and you've got contempts of Parliament. They're not hearing contempt proceedings. So, something needs to be done about that. Educate people about using their rights. But, look, right, it's the way, I think that, a lot of the stuff to do with, like, Magna Carta and stuff like that, people are focusing too much on that and not enough in some of the other things that they need to be reading. Like, for example, actually using Parliament. And, if people brought private bills more often and petitioned for private bills, they could get a lot more done in the law, right? But people don't know about private bills, and people think that it's, you got to get sponsors for it, and only big companies do private bills, like put them through. Why? Because they're not reading the Parliament books, right? The Parliament books give us the right and privileges to not be prosecuted when we're doing causes and campaigns, and no one's supposed to be getting arrested for that. But also, we should be presenting private bills and getting acts of law put through, rather than just that e-petitions website when you get 3 million signatures and nothing happens, right? People aren't as interested enough, and they've got people watching game shows on TV and answering questions and watching Strictly Come Dancing and all this bollocks, right? When people should be reading those Parliament books, not just for protests, but for writing law and saying, no, we don't want a law like that of England. We want the law like this or that. We don't want local councils to decide this. We want a jury in there. We don't want political parties to do this or that. But you know why? Because people got lazy. Women kicked off and got the vote, and all they did with the vote is either vote for Labour or Tory, which is monopolies. So it was a complete waste of time, really, with the suffragettes getting the women's vote, because all they fucking did was give it to the Labour Party or Tory, which was a complete and total utter waste of time, right? And then you got the monopolies. They might as well just, it's just like watching Man United, and they want, politics has been effectively like watching a football match. They just wanted everyone to buy their ticket and go watch, right? Vote in the ballot box and go watch the match, right? And let the players do it all, and the spectators not have anything to do with it. When we should be the ones who are making the laws up and getting them put through. This is like, this is what they're running rings around us, these MPs and parties, like, Rishi Sunak and all these people with money, right? Because we're letting them take all the money for themselves, right? And it's actually, monopolies are illegal. So, that this is not fair incense candle nonsense, right? but, you know, who listens to me? And they've managed to get everyone hooked on fame now on social media, social points. How many followers you got? How many followers? You shouldn't have any followers. People should have friends, not followers, right? Have friends, don't have followers, right? Why have they suddenly got people interested in having loads of fans, right? Why does anyone want hundreds of thousands of millions of people who they don't fucking know watching them and listening to all their shit? You know, what is wrong with having some good friends, right? And this is, again, the lure of moorishness, more. It's the fault of these horrible TV game shows, right? And, you know, Graham Norton and stuff like that, which is horrible for society. And, you know, my, you know, prospects for it all, it's going to end up being Star Wars, because that's what it's turning into, like Star Wars situation now.